never play the victim. Go forward and live your life. And remember what Mel Brooks said, relax. None of us are getting out of here alive. So what's the sense of taking it that seriously? And I've lived by that. And I think it's been a healthy, fun life as a result of that.
Welcome to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg.
All right, we are live in Laguna Beach at the Ben Reinberg I Own It studios today. And we just keep rolling out incredible guests, and very excited to talk to this gentleman. He is absolutely just an incredible entrepreneur and author and speaker and you name it. And Anthony Scaramucci, thank you so much for joining us today.
I need more friends like you, man. I need to shut off my Twitter notifications of all the hate screeds out there from all the anonymous people that are in the basement of their mom's house. And I need more friends like you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You know what? They're just jealous. That's all it's about.
Yeah.
They want to be on the top mountain like you. And so for some of our listeners, Anthony, they know you as a mooch and most familiar with your famous 11 days leading the White House Communications Department under Trump.
Yeah.
Let's kick things off. What are the big things you've been focusing on since then, like in terms of business and media and politics? Share with everyone what's going on with you.
Well, I think if it's okay, I'm going to provide a little bit of context. I think it'd be helpful. So I grew up on Long Island. My dad was a crane operator. My mother was a housewife, and she was a makeup artist. She's always commenting on my makeup on television for that reason. So on a Saturday, my dad was home. He was half asleep because of the hard work during the week. But my mother was making brides up. You follow what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, make a long story short, I got to Tufts. My parents thought it was spelled Touhs, like Tufts. And, anyway, I went to Harvard Law School, Goldman Sachs, built a business, sold the business to Neuberger Berman. Neuberger got bought by Lehman Brothers. I left Lehman Brothers in 2005 to start Skybridge. But here's the kicker. I had no network. I grew up in a blue collar neighborhood, and my father didn't hit a golf ball or a tennis ball or anything like that. And so anyway, make a long story short, I ended up in this situation where I had no network. And when you have no network, what do? You go into politics. And so I ended up going into politics with Rudy Giuliani. I wrote my first check in 1989 to Rudy. Rudy was a U.S. attorney trying to become the mayor. He failed. But now I'm in politics, and now I'm writing checks to politicians. The best thing that happened to me, this is sort of crazy now because Rudy went a little mashugana, but the best thing that happened to me is Rudy won. So in 93, I could literally go anywhere in New York. I had like the parking pass, I could park on like two wheels. I had a great relationship with the mayor. He helped me build my business. And so politics was a big entree for me, Ben, into the world. But I went one step too far, frankly, and went into politics in the real setting, like the White House, if you will. And that was one step too far. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a straight shooting business person. I'm not well suited for all that connivery and all that backstabbing and duplicity. And so I got caught saying something about Steve Bannon. It got me fired. And the good news is when you get ejected from a situation like that, if you own your own business, you just come back to your own business and go back to work. And so I needed to give you that backdrop. So what am I working on now? I'm in the asset management business. I have a podcast called Open Book, which has started with some success and fanfare, interviewing authors, but just great thinkers as well, and people that I perceive to be open books, where they're going to offer a critical, authentic assessment of something. And I'm in a $3 billion asset manager. We have some crypto exposure, private equity exposure, hedge fund exposure. Of course, I do public speaking around the world. And you mentioned my books. I might as well mention a few of them. I've written 5 books. I'm writing my 6th book right now on resilience, which is a fun book to write because I've had my ass kicked a few times. I've been fired from the White House. I got fired from Goldman. I failed the bar exam. I mean, I could give you a lot of different things that's happened to me in my career. I had a real shitty year last year, performance-wise, which is, causing some negative press. And my message to your podcast listeners and viewers is, so what? Nobody gives a shit about you. Who cares? Never play the victim. Go forward and live your life. And remember what Mel Brooks said, relax. None of us are getting out of here alive. So what's the sense of taking it that seriously? And I've lived by that. And I think it's been a healthy, fun life as a result of that.
That's so well said. I mean, obviously, your success has, I'm sure, their failures create success. They do for every entrepreneur. And
well, you fail upwards. It's like crashing
absolutely.
upwards in the market. The markets are always crashing, but guess what? They crash upward. So
That's right.
take it easy and just have some patience.
So you wrote a tell-all book in 2018 and touching on your books about your experience with Trump. And
Yes.
how was the response to the book at that time? And now that you reflect back a few years later, and you've been through different experiences, do you see anything differently now?
Yes, well, when it's interesting you say tell-all. It was very balanced, and Trump did not like the book at all because it was objective. And so even though I was still trying to support him at that time, he wanted nothing to do with that book. And the immortal words of Bill Maher, you can't go 7 for 8 for Donald Trump. You have to go 13 for 10. Of course, that's mathematically impossible. You understand what I mean? And that's why he didn't like it. But
it sounds like my investors.
Yeah, exactly. So the book was very balanced. You're asking me really good questions. I want to be thoughtful about it. I would say to you that I got a lot wrong. I equivocated. I used cognitive dissonance. I should have never supported Trump. Ultimately, Jeb Bush was right that Trump wasn't really a Republican. He was his own brand, if you will. And it was a nasty brand. It was a brand that was racially divisive, and it was a brand that was torquing the American people in the wrong way. The first name of the country is United, and we need leaders that are going to help unite us. And Trump was not interested in that. He wanted to make it all about Trump. And it was a racially charged brand. And frankly, anybody that was involved with him, Ben, owes an apology to the American people. Even if you're a Republican listening and you watch Fox News and you love Trump, okay, come on, we can do better than that. We can get those policies without that type of personality. And so what I learned is that I put my ego and my pride ahead of my wisdom. And when you do that, it leads to really bad decision making. So I had in my mind, well, I grew up in a blue collar neighborhood. I went to Tufts and Harvard. I built a successful business. Now I've got the opportunity to work for the American president, even though my personality wasn't well suited for it. And even though his personality was not well suited for me, and not just me, 83 other people that he ultimately fired, I wanted to do it anyway because I wanted it to fit my narrative of who I thought I was. And so when you do that, you make very bad decision making. So yes, I do think about it differently today. I'm more reflective about it. And I've already had this apology to people, but I'll say it openly on your podcast. Anybody that worked for Trump that did the equivocation that I did when he was talking nastily about Mexicans or saying racially charged things or, these double entendres, he was smart at, he would say something anti-Semitic and then he would say something not anti-Semitic. And so everybody had something to grab onto. The people that loved him, oh, well, he said this, and they tried to say that, but he also said this. You know what I mean? He was that kind of a person. And so I think you have to take responsibility for helping him because he did racially charge the environment unnecessarily. We don't need that in this type of country. It's a very unique experiment, this country, and we need to be better than that.
Well, let's touch a little bit on that. So you talk about in your book that your eyes were wide open to the middle class struggles, which yes. I feel the same way as you do. And you believe Trump economic policies are the ones for the country. Elaborate a little bit on that. Share your thoughts on that.
Well, I grew up in a aspirational working class family, a middle class family. We weren't poor. I would never dishonor my dad or his work ethic by telling you that we were poor. We were not poor. It was a small house. We had one full bathroom, 5 people. My dad had a budget, of course. There was always a little bit of anxiety about money, but I had Sears Toughskins, and my brother and I shared a bicycle, and we had enough things. There was no want for anything, certainly not food or anything like that. But what I would say to you is that same family today, that family that was once working class aspirational is now working class desperational. And so the wages are down. Now, no, most American wages are flat over the last 30 years, but certain jobs are down 20 to 30% in terms of real purchasing power. And so I just want you to think about the indignity of that. So there's my dad willing to work a 60-hour work week, but you could work a 60-hour work week and still need some governmental dependency. That sets up anger, Ben. It sets up dissatisfaction. It sets up economic desperation as opposed to aspiration. And so the point I was trying to make in the book is we've left a good 20 to 30% of the American people out of the American dream. They've disaffected. They're out of the establishment. They don't like the political establishment, the medical establishment, the business establishment. And Trump is sort of an avatar for their anger. And I think it's very, very important as a society that we figure out ideas or policies that we can bring them back in, and they can feel like they're part of the American story where their children and their grandchildren are going to do better than them. There's a very large group of people, Ben, right now that do not think that their grandchildren or children are going to do better than them. If anything, they're going to be in recession and do worse than them. And so I wrote about that in the book. Like or dislike Trump, he saw that. I probably was hanging out with too many rich people, frankly. I was getting their confirmed biases. So I was actually missing it, which doesn't reflect well on me, but it's a truth that I'm not afraid to share with people. But that problem has gotten worse since I wrote that book. I wrote that book in 2018. It's 2023. It's 5 years later. We're about to set up now for another presidential election. I think we're in worse shape today than we were even a couple of years back. Right?
Well, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on 2024? I mean, you have any predictions you're open to share with everyone?
Well, it's Trump's to lose on the Republican side. I think you have to take President Biden at his word that he's running again. I think that the Democrats are so afraid of Trump that they'll get out of Biden's way. I think we've learned in Democratic politics, if they have primaries, they damage their political leader. Ted Kennedy put a hurt on Jimmy Carter, and so I don't think they want to do that. And so now you have a setup where if you put 10 Republicans on stage with Donald Trump, they'll each get 5% of the vote. He'll get 30. He'll win the nomination. Now, I think Joe Biden would still beat him in a presidential election because his approval numbers and the Trump hate is up way high. But, you could be set up for another Trump presidency. It would be an unmitigated disaster for the U.S. because some of his policies I agree with. I'm not going to say otherwise. I'm trying to be as objective as possible. But he doesn't like the democracy. And so you put somebody in that seat with power over the judges and some effect on the legislature, not good. And there's a group of people around him that have decided, well, if Black and brown people are going to be the majority of Americans, and that means that, white people may not be running the place anymore. Okay, well, then let's change the rules so that white people can stay running the place. Mm-hmm. And that means we're going to subjugate the democracy. And Ben, I can prove to you that a lack of democracy means that your life and all the success you've had or my life doesn't happen, because in a democracy, the power at the top is diffuse enough, and there's a circulation of elites where they're not as focused on cronyism and suppression. But if you go into autocracies, businesses typically do well in the beginning, and then they stop doing well because the leader is in control of the laws. You need a diffuse, decentralized system where the people actually believe in the leadership's ability not to infect the legal system, but in an autocracy, the leadership effectively becomes the law. right? And then you get cronyism, and you get all of the elites at the top, you know, taking the funnel of wealth for the country, oligarchs in Russia, princelings and princes in China. Look at what the Castro family did to Cuba as an example. And then guys like you and me, we can't succeed. So you need democracy to create the economic innovation, to create the motivation, but also to give the runway for people to live in. So Americans need to understand that. You know, it would be a death blow for us if someone like Trump gets back in there. Even if you're a Republican and like his views, I'm a patriot first. I'm a partisan second, and I would prefer somebody less prone to ruining democracy than Donald Trump.
All right. Well, let's switch gears with your hedge fund, Skybridge Capital, that you founded in 2005. So what kind of asset classes are you focusing on right now? And how have you guys been doing with this current market we're in?
Well, we're doing well this quarter. You know, we're up about 9% this quarter. We did very poorly last year because we had some crypto exposure on. So we were down, you know, markets were down 20 to 30. We were down 39 because we had some crypto exposure, and crypto was down 60. You know, if you were patient, I think you're going to get rewarded because we're already up 9 right now. The banking crisis is unfolding. Guess what? People are recognizing the value of cryptocurrencies and virtual assets. And so, weirdly, in a really nasty tape and a bad financial services tape, we're having a good quarter. But you know, here's what happens though. Everybody is a long-term investor until they have short-term losses. The minute they have short-term losses, they go in crazy directions and they yell at people like Ben Reinberg, and they say you suck, and they try to blame the Ukrainian war on you as opposed to just the macroeconomic environment. So I try to tell people to be patient, hang in there. And I think we're going to be right. If we're right, we're going to get this right in size. And so, and remember, I have a ton of my own personal money in the fund, and I'm really running it for myself and my closest friends. And I just want people to be patient. We've lost some customers though, because there's some short-termism in there. But you know what happens, and I know what happens. If we have a really good performance run, they'll all be coming back. Why do that? Why not just stay with me right now and average in, which I've been doing every month. I've been adding to my personal stake in our fund every single month. So what are we in? We're in Steve Cohen, multi-strats like Izzy Englander, Dan Loeb. We have Axonic, which is a good piece of structured credit. We have some digital assets. We're long Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I think we're set up to have a really good year.
No, that's fantastic. And thank you for sharing that and saying that, because I absolutely agree with you. It's you know how you're solutionary oriented, and that's who you want to bet on, where you're investing your money, and you have to be patient. And look, I say with people, if they invest with Anthony and he goes 8 for 10, that's a hell of a run in your career. And not everything's going to be perfect, but when you have great sponsorship and
we have a great long-term record, and obviously it's made my family money, our investment strategy, and I have my money in the fund. I don't have a personal trading account, Ben. All my money is in the fund. There's no games here, and I had a bad year for my family last year, but I'm not measuring it one year versus the other. I had a horrific year in 2008, literally terrible. But 9, 10, and 11, if you just stayed patient, we did great.
Right.
I think we're in the same situation right now.
Absolutely. There's a lot of investor unease in the market lately. And how bearish and bullish are you over the next 18 months with the U.S. economy?
So I have a little bit of a contrarian view. And so just bear with me for a second. I think these inflation numbers are already coming down. And I think we have a tendency to think very linearly about life, meaning if we had inflation last year, we're going to get it this year. But that's not really what's going to happen. What ultimately happened is the supply chain disconnected longer than we expected. We had a war which affected energy prices, exaggerated them worse than we would have thought. And so our inflation prints are quite high. But in the meantime, technology, the forces of technology, the forces of biotechnology, all of these things are pushing down prices. And so those prices are going to come down naturally, in my opinion. And so I want the Fed to be careful. They're raising rates too quickly, and they're in a rush to raise them. And we were talking about longer for higher rates for longer periods of time last week, March 7th. By the 13th of March, we broke something. That would be the US banking system. And I think people should relax and just let this take its course, and inflation will come down. And of course, if you have a banking crisis, you can't have anything more disinflationary than a banking crisis. And so people should calm down and not overreact. But of course, Ben, they are. And then you'll be sitting here thinking, oh, geez, wow, these inflation numbers are way better than we expected. And I don't want people to overreact. We're going to be fine. We'll be sitting here at the beginning of 25, which is less than 2 years from now, with a robust economy, great technological improvements in the economy, great biotechnological improvements. Before we went live, you and I were talking about stem cells and all the great therapies that are right here, right upon us. And I think people are misguided. I think they're making a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you wrote a book in August of 21 about becoming a believer in crypto.
Yeah.
And it's had obviously a rough sketch lately. We had some ups recently. Are you still bullish on the sector long term?
I am bullish on the sector. I have a ton of Bitcoin. We probably have a 13-14% position in our core fund. We do have our own standalone Bitcoin fund where our partners are probably the majority investors in that. So I have a lot of exposure to Bitcoin. I also have exposure to a few other tokens in the cryptocurrency universe, but I don't see how Bitcoin doesn't get to escape velocity given everything that's going on in the US banking system, everything that's going on as it relates to potentiality of inflation, the Federal Reserve, and Bitcoin, as we're speaking, 26,000 can't be at 35 to 50,000 by the end of the year. The Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, the SEC rejected its conversion into an ETF. So what did Grayscale do? Grayscale filed a lawsuit against the SEC. The oral arguments were heard recently in the Ninth Circuit. I don't know. I mean, anything can happen in a lawsuit. I'm not saying that, but 3 of those judges are pretty conservative and don't like administrative overreach. You could have by September a victory for the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, and that will set up an explosion of demand for Bitcoin because every single person that's in the asset management space will need to have a Bitcoin cash ETF. They're not going to want to go into a solicitation on a high net worth individual and say, well, we don't have a digital asset strategy, but our competitors do. It would just make sense to have one, even if people don't put size in it. And so with 21 million coins, could this be a $20 trillion asset? It's not impossible. Gold is probably 11, 13 trillion. This, I think, is better than gold. And plus, gold will probably go up as well. So I don't know. I think this could match or eclipse gold. A $21 trillion asset, each coin is worth $1 million.
That's right.
I don't think it's impossible. Kathy Wood is saying it. Everyone's poo-pooing her because she had a bad year last year, but there will be some, geez, she ultimately got it right stories. I do predict that in her future.
That's great. So you wrote a number of thoughtful books around careers, ambition, and success in investing.
Mm-hmm.
What inspired you to share your insights? And when young people ask you about a career in finance, what's the big advice you want to share with them?
Well, I was scared. I was sheltered. It's weird. When you grow up in a blue collar neighborhood, a certain way of living. You're remarkably sheltered. We didn't take trips. We took one trip when I was a kid. It was to Miami Beach. Okay. And it was like when I was 12 years old, and my brother and I convinced my father to buy a bus ticket to Disney World while we were down in Miami Beach, just to give you a sense for our vacations. And I was sheltered and I was scared. So the books that I wrote were rite of passage books. These were like, hey, man, I went to my first Goldman Sachs job interview in poly. I had a polyester shirt, polyester tie, polyester suit. Ben, I was fully flammable for my first Goldman Sachs interview. Okay.
It sounds like so itchy, you know?
Exactly. And I look like a young Undertaker. I had the black Guido tie going, the whole thing. And the partner turned to me and said, hey, man, you're the worst dressed person that we met at the Harvard Law School. You got to buy some like real clothing. And I remember being embarrassed by that, and I remember calling my mother and she was like, what the hell is he talking about? You look great. I'm like, Mom, I don't think I look great with this size Sim suit on, And so I wanted to write a story that kids could relate to. Like if somebody picked up the book and even if they had a rich father or a poor father, they were like, all right, this guy banged his head, he scraped himself, he did a lot of stupid things, but he still stumbled his way to some level of success. And I would hope that somebody could read that book and find comfort in the tribulations and the ups and downs that I faced getting to where I am. Not saying that I didn't make mistakes. Maybe I could have gone farther if I had made less mistakes. Who the hell knows? But not caring. That's the thing. Like to impart to somebody that, hey, the journey is so worth it. I'm not the richest. I'm certainly not the poorest, but I've done a press conference from the White House. I've flown on Air Force One. I've read the Presidential Daily Brief. I've had my conference business where I've met luminaries from all over the world. I've had the opportunity to speak in, 20 or 30 different countries. Not a perfect life, made a lot of mistakes, had many, many setbacks. Because I went into politics, I could be somewhat polarizing to a certain group of people. But you know what? It's been a great experience. And I have followed something that I like, my son, Anthony, wants to be in film.
Mm.
And what I love about that is that's what he wants. He's comfortable in his own skin. And my attitude is my job is to allow him to do that and to help him. Because your kids or who's ever listening to your I Own It podcast, my message to you is you will have your best life when you are dreaming big and you are realizing that dream. Or if you're not realizing that dream, you're trying to realize that dream. Because that's when you're at the arc of the exhilaration where the adrenaline meets your brain chemistry and your decision making to live the life that you really want to live, not the life you're afraid of living or not the life that maybe one of your parents told you couldn't live or whatever it might be. And that's the arc of your actualization, and I've done that. And so I'm very happy about that. Again, it hasn't worked out perfectly. I mean, you could read some excoriating articles about me and you either get the joke and laugh about that or that shit bothers you. I laugh about it. I actually, when my grandmother told me what other people think of you is none of your business.
That's right.
I took that to heart. So when people were lighting me up or parroting me, you can probably see behind me, there's a cartoon on the back there. That cartoon was made by Steve Colbert's Late Night with Colbert animation people. And it was designed to make me look like a buffoon when I was in the White House. I thought it was funny. When I got fired, I went on Colbert's show. And I said, look, I want to come on the show, but I need one of those cells and I need you to sign it to my mom. And he was like, okay, yeah, no problem. You got to be able to roll with life and get the joke.
You just said it great. I mean, obviously when you're younger, you were living a life of scarcity. Now you live a life of abundance. When you live a life of abundance, you can look at things with a love inside of you and
sharing economy.
And you contribute. And that's what you
share. Yeah, 100%. And you want to help other people,
Yeah, you're doing the right thing. I mean, you should be proud of yourself. You've had incredible career in your books. And I just look at it that you're contributing to society. And when you're contributing, that's tremendous. I mean, and you must feel good about that because that's what it's about, is that you live a life of abundance. You're not in scarcity. And yeah, I grew up from modest means as well. And, you do your scarcity and you're wondering like, how am I going to how am I going to create a living and build a family? And you think about all these things. And so, no, you should be absolutely proud of yourself. I
Well,
want to,
I appreciate you saying that, but
yeah.
listen, I mean, I've made some blunders and stumbles. I missed the birth of my fifth child.
Mhm.
It was July 21st, 2017. I was with Donald Trump at the Boy Scouts of America speech that he gave in West Virginia. And my wife and I were fighting at the time. She actually filed for divorce on me in July. And there I was missing the birth of my fifth kid. And my entire personal life was upside down. And I was about to go into a political tailspin as well. And why am I bringing that up? I'm bringing that up because that was a really shitty time in my life. But you know what? I put it back together. I made peace with her. Thank God we kept our marriage together. I was able to heal whatever was going wrong with us there. And I went back to my company and worked my ass off at rebuilding my company. But Ben, that was a really rough time. I want your viewers and listeners, you have the best name in podcast history. I own it. I want your viewers and listeners listening to me own the bad shit that I contributed to my marriage or the bad shit that I contributed to my career. Because when you own it, you end up therapeutically changing it, or you end up being able to recognize a mistake or a weakness, and you're able to take yourself in a different direction. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I think it's important for people to understand that they can fail upward, they can make mistakes and still hit the target that they're shooting for in their lives.
So let's talk about something I think is great is your thought leadership forum SALT, which
Mhm.
was founded in '08. And I always want to ask you this, like what inspired you to start SALT? And are there any high impact policy ideas that you're passionate about that you feel are not getting the
Yeah,
mainstream traction
good question.
they deserve?
Well, let me just answer the SALT question quickly, then I'll go to the high impact. So that was accidental. Like most things, Jenner discovers penicillin because he leaves out the moldy bread, and it turns out the moldy bread, it's killing the penicillin's killing the bacterial infection, and then he realizes now he's got something, right? Jenner, I think I think I conflated those. I think Jenner was the smallpox guy. I'm sorry. I have to figure out who made the penicillin, but you get the point that I'm making. Both of those things were accidents, and so SALT was an accident, meaning we were. It was Fleming that discovered the penicillin. So I'll make sure I correct that for your podcast. But we were not doing well. It was 2008. We were cratering. All of the conferences were getting canceled. Barack Obama said, let's not go to Vegas. We don't want to be highfalutin while you're taking government money. Made sense. People canceled their conferences. I was like, all right, this is an opportunity for us to create a conference and fill that void, fill that vacuum. So it was accidental. But when you talk about a policy initiative or idea, for me, it's long-term strategic planning for the United States. So
Okay.
that's literally nonpartisan, long-term strategic planning. Where is our 10-year plan to right-size the deficit? Where's our 10-year plan to deal with, or maybe 20-year plan to deal with entitlements? How about evening out the education system, at least the K through 12 education system? What is our plan? We don't have these plans. We have 2-minute plans. We have 3-minute cable news fights. We have 2-year terms or 4-year terms, or if you're a senator, a 6-year term, but we have no planning. Chinese have a plan. They have a plan for next year, this year, 2049, 100-year plan. And I'm just telling you, for me, that is a big bugaboo for me because I know we can fix anything. These problems that we have are man and woman made, but let's face it, mostly man made because of the stupidity of our male politicians. Let's just be honest about it. But we can fix it. If it's man or woman made, it can be fixed by man or woman. And there's policy solutions for every problem that we have, but it's not a short-term solution. Most of this stuff would take 10 or 15 years to resolve and get them going in the right direction. So that's my pet peeve. No short-term planning anymore. Let's try to come up with a long-term, nonpartisan, right or wrong, as opposed to left or right solution. Makes sense?
Yeah, well said. Well said. So you're involved with several charities. Share more about the organizations you're involved with.
Well, I mean, I got a couple of things that I really like. I mean, one of the things I've been doing for 20 years is the Brain Tumor Foundation. My dad had a brain tumor. We've worked on early detection. Unfortunately, brain tumor incidence of brain tumor disease is way up. It's likely environmental. It's probably not from the cell phone, but it could be from fertilizer or chemicals, things that we eat. And so we're spending a lot of time and energy on early detection because that's the best way to cure somebody from brain disease, but also on experimental therapies and vaccines. You know, we've been at the forefront of helping to create some vaccines. Just like, what do you mean by that? Well, to get into the brain, because you have this blood barrier that protects the brain, you have to have your own antibodies. And, you know, if you can figure out what's going wrong with the brain, you can give yourself a vaccine that creates antibodies that go up into the brain and kill the cancer. And so these were developed in Germany, and they're now being tested here in the United States. And so I'm very proud of that. I mean, we've spent a lot of money, time, and energy on that, raising awareness. I've been on the student mentoring program for 25 to 30 years, actually. You know, I have one mentee that's like 43 now, Ben, if you can imagine that. I met him when he was 13. He's now 43.
Wow.
He's got a great young family, and he's doing well, thank God. And somebody I mentored was living up in the South Bronx 30 years ago. I spend time on a lot of different charities. There's a group called Shatterproof that we give money to. It's a drug addiction clinic, drug awareness, how to get people off drugs. Unfortunately, I have some of that in my family where there's alcoholism and drug addiction. And so we try to spend time on that. I mean, I don't want to inundate you with all the different things that I work on, but, you know, it's mostly healthcare related. It's some education and some mentoring related. And it's fun for me.
That sounds great. So, as you know, the name of the show is I Own It. It's being responsible for every aspect of your life, which you do. So we're all works in progress. And obviously you touched a little bit about your wife, which I appreciate you sharing.
Mm-hmm.
What was a recent example where you felt like you realized I don't own it fully? Like what was that moment you had recently?
Really good questions. I want to be thoughtful about it. I would say that, and my first wife will be pissed at me because I'm talking about our divorce and she hates when I do that and she yells at me, but I'm going to say it anyway. I would say that I failed in some respects to own the responsibilities that I had to that marriage and to my kids. And I think I let that go too long, the conflict avoidance. Okay, rather than addressing the things, trying to clear them up, I let that go too long. And I say, so I would say recently, I think I've done a better job of trying to deal with that, not passive aggressively, not dishonestly, like sometimes we do things where there's a great expression, people remember things the way they need to, Ben, not the way they actually happened. Okay. But how about really assessing it honestly and saying, okay, well, what was your fault in that? And how can you make that better? And so I would say with my adult children from my first marriage, I think that I have had a bad habit of letting sort of that misremembering something creep in and handling things in a passive aggressive way. And I'm really trying to stop doing that. And so I don't know if that directly answers your question.
Yeah, it's perfect. Exactly.
It's like something that I'm doing wrong, but that's something I've been doing wrong persistently that I'm trying to correct.
you were able to reflect back and say, okay, I created this situation, and
Yeah,
that's
you're always exactly.
we create everything we do.
Right.
It's so well said.
Right.
What's the best way for people to engage with you and follow you? Are you on social media? I mean,
Yeah, so I have a podcast called Open Book that's on Spotify and Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. It's called Open Book with Anthony Scaramucci. It's a fun little podcast. I interview a lot of fun people. I'm at Scaramucci on both Twitter and Instagram. I think I'm also at Scaramucci on LinkedIn. Listen, you could just Google Scaramucci. There's a lot of videos. Some of it's satire. If you really want to laugh, you could watch Bill Hader. Google Scaramucci, Bill Hader. He made fun of me on Saturday Night Live when I was in the White House, and Benny called me human cocaine. So I thought that was actually okay. Actually, I thought it meant maybe that makes people happy or something.
Hey, if someone's talking about you, that
Right.
they're putting up on a pedestal. So
Right. So I was saying to Lorne Michaels, the creator of Saturday Night Live, I ran into him at a Yankee game, and he said, "Well, what'd you think of the impersonation?" I said, "Well, he probably needed a little more hairspray. I didn't love the way he was tying his tie, but other than that, I thought he did a pretty good job."
All right. Well, I got to get you out of here soon. So let's wrap up with our 3 questions. I've been waiting to ask you these. So in our Laguna Beach studio, we have a couch, and you're 59 years old.
Yeah,
You look great, by the way.
I'm trying.
Well,
I'm
you
in the
do.
gym a lot, although maybe I need some of these stem cells. But yes, I am trying.
We'll get you there. And so I said, Anthony, get on the couch, lay down, close your eyes, and go back to when you were 16. And you've had a lot of experience, success, failures, a lot of knowledge you've developed over the years, met a lot of great people. What would you tell your 16-year-old self if you can give advice? You can go back today and talk to yourself. What would you tell yourself that you've learned in these years?
So I have really thought about this. So it's not a flippant, immediate knee-jerk reaction. This is a well thought out answer, actually. Be bolder.
Oh.
Be braver. Don't be so fearful. I was intimidated when I met Goldman Sachs partners when I was 24 or 25. When I walked inside of a commercial office building, because my father was a blue-collar guy and never went into a commercial office building, the first time I was in there, I was quite intimidated. And I would tell you that everybody puts their socks on the same way or their underpants, and they have to go to the bathroom both 1 and 2. And I would say be less intimidated, and before I met a wealthy or famous person, I thought, okay, well, they must be way different than me. But it turns out that they're really not that different. And I remember when I was in law school saying to somebody, yeah, you think you're smart, but there's kids putting in sheetrock in my old neighborhood that are as smart as you. They just didn't have a father that was an investment banker or a lawyer. So guess what they're doing? Their father put in sheetrock, so therefore they're putting it in. So I would tell my younger self, be bolder, be braver, be less intimidated, and be more confident. I think that's the more thing. I was tentative as a kid.
All right. Well, it's our last day on earth together.
Yeah.
God forbid. It's just me and you. It's just me and you, kid.
Well, if you and me, we're not having sex, Ben, unfortunately. I was hoping you left me there with my wife. I would be like in the Blue Lagoon.
That's
shields and shit.
I don't go that way. But
all right.
Anyways, it's our last meal together.
Okay. Yeah.
What are we eating and what are we drinking? It's your choice.
All right. Now, if I'm having 20 meals, it's Italian.
Okay.
If it's my last meal, we're going full out Mexican.
Oh. Hopefully
it's a great place in Laguna Beach.
All right.
We're drinking shit ton of tequila and margaritas. And I got a lot of hot sauce going for sure. I'm burning my tongue. And we're probably finishing up with some churros and ice cream.
Oh my God. All right. Sign me up. All right. So
I'm right now, actually.
In our I Own It studios, we have electric guitars, a drum set, and a grand piano. And by the way, if you ever come to Laguna Beach, you are more than welcome to hang out and come in the studio. You would be awesome in person. I would love it.
Love to do that with you.
Open door, bud. Open door for you. So you're in studio with me, and you can pick any musician or band to play us a song. They could be living or deceased, Anthony.
Yes.
Who would you pick to come in, and what would they play us?
So look, I'm sorry, I'm not into classical music like Beethoven. I'm sure somebody would say like Mozart and shit like that, but I have no interest. I'm going to totally expose myself here. He's still alive, and I think he is by far the best singer of his generation, and it's my number one band. I would want to be in your studio with Led Zeppelin.
Ooh.
Okay, and I would hit Stairway to Heaven, All of My Love. Those would be the two songs that I would go with. And I would, anything Robert Plant wanted to sing after that. Okay, these guys are mad at each other now because this is what happens in rock and roll bands. The egos get to themselves, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Keith Richards and Mick Jagger probably don't love each other. You could read their books and, you know, they don't really love each other, but they figured out a way to harmonize and stick together, you know. But these guys that are in these hard-charging rock and roll bands, they usually break up. But Robert Plant, to me, was the man. And, you know, that was, to me, the band. And there's a great biography about them that a guy by the name of Bob Spitz just wrote called Led Zeppelin, the Band. And even Steven Tyler said that when he heard them for the first time, he copied a lot of the elements of Led Zeppelin into Aerosmith. So I'm going with that.
I love it. You're the first one I ever said Led Zeppelin. I love that. I love Led Zeppelin. What a great answer. Well, Anthony Scaramucci, thank you so much for joining us today. What a pleasure.
And thank you, man. Great to be on with you. I hope
come
into your office. You're going to get stuck with me. All right?
That's okay. You're open door policies. You're welcome. You know, if you are interested in listening to more episodes like this, like we just had with Anthony, feel free to drop kick that right-hand button and click subscribe. Feel free to click the like button as much as possible so we can let this content, just like Anthony just shared with us, go viral to as many people around the world. If you want to follow me, go to benreinberg.com. I'm available on all social media platforms, and feel free to keep listening to the I Own It podcast. For more information on our company, go to alliancecgc.com. We are the leaders in commercial real estate investing. And if you are interested in investing in our brand new fund, the Alliance Medical Property Fund, feel free to log on and follow us to learn all about what medical investing is about. So, Anthony Scaramucci, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm really grateful you had on, and thank you for sharing all your knowledge with our audience.
Hey, Ben, it was an awesome time. I really appreciate you bringing me on to the podcast. Thank you again.
Thank you for listening to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg. To hear our past episodes and connect with Ben, visit benreinberg.com.